Okay, so chapter 23 is about metabolism and nutrition. So in this chapter, we're going to see at a better detail what happened to these nutrients. So one measure of the nutritional value that we have in nutrients is the calorie. So 1 calorie is defined as the amount of energy or heat, the amount of heat that is required to raise 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. In terms of diet, we have calorie written with capital letter C, which means that you have 1,000 calories. So it's a kilocalorie. And then, of course, if you have 1,000 calories, that will be the amount of heat that is required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. And then we use the heat units to measure the amount of energy in our food. Now, metabolism is defined as the sum of all the metabolic reactions or chemical reactions that happens in our body at a given time. And this metabolism includes harnessing the energy in chemical bonds of dietary nutrients that may be used to make ATP. So ATP derives from actually the use of these chemical nutrients, and then we have this chain in the glycolysis cycle that can form ATP, but also we have ATP generated within the mitochondria in the electron transport chain. So the two major bases of metabolism or division will be catabolism and anabolism. In catabolism, you break down large molecules into small molecules. In anabolism, you do the opposite. You bring together, two small molecules to form a large molecule. And then all of these will help in anabolism to form macromolecules like proteins, polysaccharides, lipids, and nucleic acids, which are the basis of our cells. So, in catabolism, again, you break down these large components of our nutrients to make smaller components so that you can assimilate them, and you release heat. So this is an exergonic reaction. And then in anabolism, you absorb heat. So this is an endergonic reaction. And in this case, again, you bring together two small molecules to form these 4 macromolecules that we have in our body, which are lipids, carbohydrates, nucleic acids, and proteins. Now, our cells uses these monomers as a source of nutrients: glucose, fatty acids, and amino acids. Glucose is coming from these starch molecules that are stored within the fruits, as well within the vegetables that we ingest. And this will be the main source of energy that our body prefers, because chemically speaking, breaking down molecules of glucose is easier than breaking down proteins and lipids. So our brain specifically loves glucose. And then fatty acids, which are lipids coming mostly from triglycerides, are degraded and then they can be absorbed, and they can be used, for instance, to make lipid membranes, and otherwise they will be stored together with glycerol to form again triglycerides, which is the main storage form of energy that we have. And then amino acids, they're not stored. They are used all the time. So they will be used to make proteins. And then we have transamination processes in which the non-essential amino acids can be converted into a different type. But if you don't ingest these essential amino acids, then a particular protein may not be made. And if it's a channel or if it's an enzyme, your metabolism slows down. And then most of our body, guys, are made out of proteins. So this will be the last source of energy that we will use to make ATP. If you have glucose available, you store it as glycogen. And then you're fasting, you start using your glycogen to get glucose. The next molecule that you will be used is lipids. And the last one will be proteins. Many people, when they go into these diets, they don't control well their intake of proteins. They ingest less proteins than usual. And then they end up, of course, losing weight, but at the expense of their own muscles. And they're very happy, but they become weaker because they don't have enough proteins in their body. So I already mentioned this, but anabolism can be used to form all of these macromolecules. Now, in metabolism, we take into consideration the law of conservation of energy. Energy is not created, nor can be destroyed. It only changes its form. So we have different forms of energy. We have kinetic energy, which is energy in motion, and we have potential energy, which is a form of storage of energy. It's like when you are recharging your battery and you have certain voltage in your battery, so that's potential. And then when you're using this battery voltage, that it is kinetic energy. And then we have exergonic reactions in which you release energy, so your products have less energy than the reactants. And then the opposite will be for endergonic reactions. So you need energy for having this motion, this transformation of energy. So the products of the reaction have more energy than the reactants. So when it comes to catabolism, since you have an exergonic reaction, you release energy, so you generate heat. And then this energy, it is used to fuel endergonic reactions. So it's a cycle. And then that drives the synthesis of ATP, and then ATP is broken down to generate energy. So you start breaking down these links between the phosphate groups, starting from the last one away from the adenosine, and then you end up with adenosine diphosphate, and then you break down that to form adenosine monophosphate. So then this energy from ATP fuels endergonic reaction, anabolic reactions in the cell. So then, that when it comes the law of conservation of energy, energy is not lost. It is just changing its form. From endergonic to exergonic or exergonic to endergonic, you have exchange, and that's a cycle that leads to these metabolic reactions. So it's an investment. So here is an example of coupling these two reactions. So in this case, we start with energy released from an exergonic catabolic reaction. So in this case, let's say that you have any nutrients. It can be glycogen, it can be lipids, or it can be amino acids. You can have a dipeptide bond, a bond between your glucose molecules in glycogen, etc. So you have an enzyme, or you hydrolyze this bond, and then you release energy. And this substrate that was linked, A and B, now can be broken down into these products, A and B. And then this energy that typically is in the form of heat, most of the times is 60% of the energy that is released as heat. And then they can say, some people say, well, what a waste, 60% of breaking down a chemical bond, it is released as a form of heat. Guess what? These chemical reactions have to happen at a specific temperature. In our case, in our body, it's 37 degrees Celsius. So it's not a waste, it's just to keep these reactions happening at the specific temperature. And then part of this energy will be used to, from an exergonic or a catabolic reaction, to drive an energonic or anabolic reaction. So if you have adenosine diphosphate, so this is adenine plus 2 phosphate groups, that's why it's called diphosphate. Di means 2, phosphate for phosphates. Then if you add inorganic phosphate that you have in the cytoplasm, you join these together, and then you form ATP. And then this ATP now can be used to drive an exergonic reaction, and then you keep on going. So this, in this case, this exergonic reaction can be used to bring together these two molecules and then form a C and D product. So ATP then is the main source of energy. It's like if it was the currency of energy, like money, $1. And then ATP is unstable, and the phosphate groups have a negative charge which repel each other. So that can lead to a little bit instability within this molecule. And that's why you don't keep that without spending it to form these other reactions. And then these reactions can happen under the influence of water. So this is hydrolytic reactions, and water can break down the bonds between the two phosphate groups, resulting in inorganic phosphate and then ADP or AMP if you break down one of these. Now, the thing between ATP phosphate groups is that you have a high energy bond between these phosphate groups. And then the enzymes, when enzymes break down this ATP, are called the ATPase. So, again, 60% of the energy is lost as heat, but it's not a loss as heat, it's just that you maintain these enzymes that are nearby warm at the right temperature, and then 40% of these chemical reactions form ATP. So ATP is used directly, so it pays for, again, it's an investment. And then the process of adding phosphate groups, not only to ATP, but other enzymes, like with kinases. Enzymes that add phosphate groups, guys, are called kinases. So this is called phosphorylation. And actually, if you remember the process of making ATP in the mitochondria, it is called oxidative phosphorylation. So ATP can be hydrolyzed, yielding ADP and inorganic phosphate. Inorganic phosphate is written with a lowercase, well, not lowercase, it's underscript in the part where to the right of the P. And then an example will be, for instance, when you have energy released in the first step of an energonic reaction, which produces an unstable compound. So you have glutamate plus inorganic phosphate plus energy that is going to lead to phosphorylation of glutamate, which is one of these amino acids. And then when you add an amino group to this glutamate phosphate, you form glutamine. and then you can release inorganic phosphate. So you can convert this into a different chemical, glutamine, and then you release inorganic phosphate and energy. And then we have ox-redox or redox reactions in which you have transfer of hydrogens between molecules. And this is driven by particular carriers of these hydrogens, like NAD or FAD, which are derived from vitamins. So in this case, you had transfer of electrons between two compounds. One will be donating the electrons, and the other one will accept the electrons. The one that donates the electrons will be the molecule that it gets oxidized, and the one that gets the electrons will be reduced. In the case of NADH, nicotine adenine molecule with hydrogens, if it donates its electrons, that was in a reduced form when it was NADH, when it donates the electrons, will become NAD. In that case, it will be oxidized. So an example is when heat is generated as the element in a flask is burned. So a mnemonic to know when a molecule is oxidized and when it's reduced is oil rig. Oxidation is losing electrons, while reduction is gaining electrons. So NAD, when it gains electrons, become NADH. So in this case, will be reduced. And then NADH, which will have the extra electrons, it will be reduced. When it donates, it becomes NAD. It will be oxidized. And they are coupled. So, for instance, when a wood is burning, the compounds on the wood are oxidized, and then the loose electrons to the oxygen in the air will be reduced as they accept these electrons. So that was happening in our body. We will have nutrients that are undergoing these ox-redox reactions.